being here with us, just getting everything all set. We're preparing to stream it live on YouTube as well. Super exciting. And that stuff all just takes an extra minute or two, as usual. All right. All right. Looks like we are live on YouTube also. So we are right at 8 o'clock. I'm going to make sure that we give everybody just a couple moments. I appreciate everybody showing up so early, and this is going to be a super exciting evening and a super exciting week. So let's see, just a few more moments. Looks like we're live on YouTube. I see a whole bunch of new folks are popping in now. Thanks everybody for showing up. It's so great to see you. We're just giving everybody else a couple moments to hop on. I always like to be ready to go right away, but as some of the folks I know I see in the chat on the participant list there, they know me and I'm good at walking in a minute or two late. So I want to make sure that everybody's got a chance to come in here. So just a couple more moments. See all kinds of good friends here. Thanks everybody for joining us. It's a crazy time and I'm glad we're all here to be able to support each other. So perfect. So everyone, thanks so much for joining us. This has been a bit of a crazy time. So a couple questions for you. I mean, I'm sure you've all been hearing how bad the COVID-19 pandemic is, and you're probably looking for ways to protect yourself and your family. Maybe you're getting tired of getting stuck at home, like with your kids, like I'm here with my daughter all the time and I love it. But at the same time, it's kind of getting a little bit challenging because we're not getting the space that we're used to in that little school break, and other things are, how would you love to be able to utilize this time to strengthen your bond with your family and even to, get into the kitchen with your kids and have them help cook and then actually eat some healthy, nourishing food. So these are the things that I've been really wanting to do. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity to bring a panel of experts together to talk about that. So my name is Dr. Tom Moorcroft. I created the Coronavirus Voices of Reason mini summit that we did a couple weekends ago. We had over 1,500 people live and we had over 4,500 people register for the replay. And I was just completely blown away by the support that we got for that event. And I knew we could do a lot more. So with the pandemic continuing, and we had a whole bunch of new challenges arising, and especially since many of us are, as I mentioned, stuck home day and night with our families. So I heard a lot of people talking, calling the office, sending me messages saying that we needed more resources to help ourselves and our families to not just get by, but to actually thrive during these challenging times. So many parents have reached out looking for guidance on how they can use this time to inspire their children and how to take the next step to kind of up-level their health and to create lifelong health habits in themselves and in their families. So I decided that we should probably dive a little deeper into these topics, and that's why I created this mini-series. Over the next 3 days, we're going to be hearing from experts in all aspects of health, from hormones and fasting to healing autoimmune disorders with food, and even how to cook food with your family and, believe it or not, actually make it kind of fun. We're going to talk about how to talk to our kids about this, and what we can do to support our children and ourselves in the event that maybe we have a difficult time focusing. I mean, so many of my children in my practice have pre-existing executive function and focus issues. And so now they're at home and parents are, might not be used to helping them in a school sort of situation. And then I also find that while I can focus really well, I'm getting distracted just by being in a different environment. So we're going to talk about that and how to really get focused. And what if you think you or your children have COVID-19, or, and then what can you do? What kind of herbs could you take? Is there a role for mindset in changing this? And what is the role of food in all of this as well? And then also, what about dreaming, and future building? We're going to dive into all of these things. So the question to me really is, how are you going to get through this? And because we're all going to get through, but how are we going to use that time to create an amazing future for ourselves and our families, and to teach our children that they can design their own future? The really cool part about all this is I'm so excited to share that in addition to all the 9 experts we have joining us. We have a very special guest, visionary, inspirational speaker, and dream builder, Mary Morrissey, will help us kind of bring our mini series to an end, but really create a beginning to our whole new lives at the end of this. So over the next 3 days, we're going to hear from experts, and they're going to be sharing their professional opinion and what they've been doing with patients and in their expertise. But also, we're going to check in and see what they're doing at home, because we're all kind of dealing with the same situation together. You're going to hear from doctors who have actually personally had COVID-19, the things they did to get better, and more importantly, at least to me, is how did that impact them personally and their families? And I'm also going to make sure that every night we get a little bit of a brief update on what's going on with COVID-19. And tonight, I'm super happy to let you know that the total number of new cases in the US, as well as the total number of new deaths, actually seems to be kind of on the downward now, finally. I don't know if that's going to hold up, but I mean, certainly there is a little breath of fresh air in that. But I really don't want to be focused so much on sort of all the medical stuff we've seen in the news. Let's let the doctors and researchers focus on that. I want to focus on the information that we need to make really good decisions for our own health, so that we can empower you with the knowledge and the tools to thrive now and into the future. Because almost all the healing strategies that we're going to be talking about and that we're going to share with you during this event are going to be applicable not only now, but in the rest of your life. And that's really super important to me. So I'm glad you decided to join us. Remember, we are recording this event. So a few days after we're done, we're going to make sure that everybody gets an email giving you full and free access to the replay. You can also share the event link with anyone you like. Feel free to join, they can join us live. They can jump in tomorrow night and Wednesday night, and then they also will have access to the replay too. So just, send them the same link you used to sign up. That'd be great. We're also going to be streaming to YouTube in the event that anybody has any issues with Zoom. And the last piece before we dive right into the meat of everything tonight is when you do receive that replay link, you're going to receive access to a lot more information about each speaker, a little bit more about who they are, and also a lot of them have free gifts and resources to share. So I'm really excited to be able to dive right in. So tonight, our first guest is a really good friend of mine, Cynthia Thurlow. She's a nurse practitioner and women's hormone expert who is a nutrition expert. And, I think I first heard about her as the person who did this insane TED Talk about intermittent fasting that's gotten well over 5 million views. Like, I don't even understand that number. But anyway, we'll learn a lot more about Cynthia in a second. So Cynthia, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Tom. It's really a pleasure.
Yeah, this is so much fun. So how have things been going? I mean, what's been going on in your world with the family and
Yeah, it's been interesting. So I have a 12-year-old and 14-year-old, so 2 middle schoolers, one of whom takes 3 high school classes. And my county has effectively told the kids whatever they got, the average grade for first, second, and third quarter is going to be their yearly grade. And they're not really doing a lot of new instruction. So even though I'm in this, fairly affluent county, parents are really left with overseeing a lot of busy work and trying to find, where we can navigate this new normal. So my kids were very disappointed that I put them in a writing class, and my older son is taking a geometry class, but we are definitely have kind of gotten into a groove. Our dogs are loving having everyone home.
Right.
But, I have boys and they're used to being really physically active. And so creating WODs or workout of the day and getting them on their bikes and getting them outside and, doing a lot of cooking. And as you can imagine, teenage boys have massive appetites. And so one of the things my husband and I have had to navigate is the amount of food we've had to stock in the house to keep everyone happy. And so now we give them a menu every day. And that has made our lives a little easier because it was a free for all the first couple of weeks till we realized that we had to scale back a little bit. Otherwise there would be no food in the house. So we're doing well. We've created new schedules and new rituals. And I try to explain to the kids, even though you're not in school, we can't stay up late every single night. And they get some unfettered electronics access, which they don't normally have. So I think their quality of life, given the circumstances, is not bad right now.
It's so funny because like, the in the very beginning, it was like school came, they actually had somebody drive and bring us a whole bunch of paperwork. And this is what we're going to do for school. And our school really got right on top of it. And then it's kind of like they're doing meetings every day, but
Mhm.
in between, it's like, here's a 10-year-old who has to do hours of self-directed learning.
Correct. Correct. It's well, I don't know what's worse, that or our school district, they probably have an hour and a half of work a day, because if they do it diligently, then it all gets done. But there's nothing like being in a classroom with a teacher, and parents are working, and I mean, I have to really give it to homeschooling parents, because that's a whole other skill set that I did not possess before.
Right.
But we're trying to stay on top of it. There's it is really a challenge, I think, for every family that's out there. We're all trying to navigate this new normal.
Right. Well, it's like our daughter Talia. I mean, she's just like, let's do homeschool. Let's go homeschool. We'll do skiing in the morning and I can do school in the afternoon, the evening. And I'm like, yeah, that's going to take a lot of a schedule. And then we started doing this because we were forced. I'm like, I don't know that we can do that.
I know
So,
it's challenging. It's really challenging. So we've had to kind of institute morning is schoolwork, then around lunchtime you get a break, then you get some free time, and then there's another class, like a structured class, in the afternoon from 3 to 5. And then I try to get as much work done from 3 to 5 as I can while they're
oh, I know, right?
class.
Well, I think that that's one of the things we're all going through is we've got a bunch of like, I'm home and my wife is home, but we actually are still working. And
Yes.
then like our kids have so much more access to us right now. I mean, how are you guys? Is the schedule really helping or?
It's helping a little bit in terms of expectations, because we went through a whole process of, oh, I'm just going to sleep till 10 because my parents won't let me have electronics till 12. And I was like, oh, no, 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 no. We're going to get up at 8. We're going to shower. We're going to make our beds. Uh, I would say that my introverted son doesn't so much care about access, because he only comes around if he really wants something. My extrovert is the one who's actually struggled more. And so trying to facilitate things to keep him busy. I mean, we've got puzzles and book reading and scavenger hunts. I mean, as many things as we can to keep him entertained,
Mhm.
within reason. He'll go off and do something for the scavenger hunt and come back. But it's definitely been interesting. I think it is. I think the first, when we were 2 weeks in, I think that was when I was having the most trouble. Like one day it rained. I've been doing workouts in the morning and then taking the dogs for a walk in the afternoon. It's the only time of the day that I don't have to talk. So I've savored that time. And one day I got outside and it started to rain. I almost cried. And I
Oh my
started to
God.
realize, like, that was if I could just get that hour walk in, I just felt so much better. I could kind of like come back and be renewed and could come back into the house. And as an introvert, it's definitely been a challenge. So
Yeah, it's like you're on all the time. Like
yes.
I'm kind of the opposite of the introvert, like by a long shot, but I'm valuing a few minutes of just
Mhm.
privacy,
Yes.
you
Oh,
know.
there's no privacy. Someone asked me, oh, can you, and I was like, no, there is no privacy. Unless I'm on my walk with the dogs in the neighborhood, there's no privacy. It's
And
all
like mom
gone.
and dad time,
Yeah. No, oh, that's
right?
gone. Totally gone.
Right. Yeah, so yeah, it's definitely been a huge challenge. I mean, so what's it like for the boys being locked in a house with someone who's got your medical expertise? And I remember we were talking, previously on your podcast about what you're making them do and what you're not making them do. And I think it's so insightful to understand, like, here we are, like medical experts in holistic healing and health. Yet there's a reality to this. So what are you
Yes.
telling your kids to do during this? And how are you taking your expertise and kind of, you
Well,
know, making it real
yeah, I
and
mean,
doable?
I think it's hard, because I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. So they can obviously, if they wanted to access the news, they can read I can't insulate them completely. And so they've heard me and my husband talking, and I don't ever want them to come from a place of fear. I want them to have information. So we have open discussions about what's going on, and about why they can't go to the stores with us, and why, once a week I go to the grocery store, I'm by myself, and I procure all these groceries, which you bring in, then it's this long process of cleaning everything before it gets put away. And so, a lot of it is getting them actively involved in meal planning, and, having fun foods around. I think anyone that knows me, my kind of standard mantra is moderation, not deprivation. And so I think it's
Hmm.
woefully unrealistic if I think my kids aren't going to want to have fun foods. And so I get them actively involved in the planning process, and then I get better buy-in. So having middle schoolers who oftentimes think their parents are the least cool people in the world, which is hard to accept, but I've gotten there. I find that we do better when we have meals together. So we have very structured dinner times. Like we all sit down and eat dinner, try to most days. Lunch, they kind of get to do, it's kind of a free for all in terms of they eat when they want to.
Hmm.
But they're also navigating having a lot, they've got a lot more chores because there are no cleaners. There's no one coming to clean the house anymore. And so, they've been humbled to learn how to dust and vacuum and clean toilets and, clean up after themselves. So I think there's been some degree of a new normal for them that hasn't been bad. And I told them, I said, eventually you'll be a fully functioning adult when you leave the house. You need to do, these are skills you're going to need anyway. So
Well,
trying to get them.
one of the things that you just reminded me of is like growing up, I was so mad when my dad made me help him fix the
Mhm.
toilet or when he made me clean it for my mom or whatever.
Yeah,
But I use this all the time.
right.
And I think I've seen, like, even with our daughter, it's so hard to ask them to do these things. So that's really awesome because it's true. They're going to need it.
Right, right. Like before we started recording, my kids were dry mopping the floors. We have hardwoods, and so they were dry mopping. They were not happy about it, and I said, "You need to be done before 7:55 because I've got to jump on this call, and I can't have you guys making noise." So I think that they've been indoctrinated into a little more meal prep. Things are a bit more structured about food. Definitely structured with chores, and they're expected to get off electronics and contribute and read and do all sorts of, in their minds, these are catastrophic disasters. Like, oh, I can't believe my mother would ask me to do that. I'm like, well, this is reality. I
I know,
can't do it
right?
all. Yeah.
Well, think
Can't
about it.
do it
When
all.
we were younger, we didn't have all this electronic distract. I mean, I
No.
remember like Atari with the little
Yep.
ball that was going
Yeah.
across.
Yeah. Asteroids. Yeah, exactly. Frogger, all those things. And ironically enough, my husband found like his old Atari because his parents never threw anything away, found his old Atari. And so my kids were appalled when he pulled it up. They were like, oh my God, I can't believe you used to play
How,
that.
right? Oh my God.
Well, things are more sophisticated. So,
I know, right? Oh my goodness. So I think one of the things that so many of us know you by is intermittent fasting.
mhm.
And I love moderation, not deprivation. So I really wanted to dive in for a minute. Like, what are you telling people in terms of like, how do we optimize our meal choices and the utilization possibly of intermittent fasting, both for just health overall and really specifically prevention or even maybe treatment of a viral illness?
Well, I think when you look at the study data, 24 hours or less of fasting is okay right now. So if someone is interested in doing a 24-hour or less fast, great. I'm really talking to my patients about shortening their feeding window because most of us are less active now that we're
Hmm.
in social isolation. So I'm definitely having conversations about maybe instead of doing a 16-8, 16 hours fasted with an 8-hour feeding window. Some people are doing, an 18-hour fast with a 6-hour feeding window. And they're actually feeling like if they do that, it doesn't matter if they have a piece of chocolate or they have some wine because they're just shortening that window in which they're eating. So that's the first thing. I would say, secondly, still concentrating when you're putting meals together, protein and healthy fats. If you do that combination first, get the protein portions proper, you're going to be satiated. And then, you add in your carbohydrates I always say, if you've earned them. And then making room for having some fun foods. If you want to have popcorn one night, if you want to have a glass of wine, if you want to have a brownie. I mean, last night we had Easter dinner and I made brownies. For some reason, that's what the kids wanted. And we all had a portion and we enjoyed it. And then we were done with it. So I think that you have to be realistic about what foods make your body feel good and which foods don't. And so that generally will focus people more on quality protein and healthy fats, less on the carbs. So if you have chips, don't do it every night. If you're having dessert, don't do it every night. If you're having wine, probably don't want to do that every night, especially if you're trying to kind of aim to stay with a tightened kind of feeding window. But I think it really depends on, you as an individual. I know I'm getting messages from my patients, and a lot of them are feeling like they're craving sugar. I think a lot of it's people are stressed. And so I always say good, better, best. If you really feel like you're
Mm,
really struggling, then have a piece of fruit. If the fruit doesn't satisfy it, then, maybe, you have a small piece of dark chocolate. If that doesn't do it, then maybe this is going to be your 1 or 2 nights out of the week that you're going to have a sweet treat, and then just let it be. I'm not a fan of people beating themselves up about food choices. You always say tomorrow's another day. If someone really went overboard, you could just have one meal the following day and then kind of get back to your normal feeding and fasting schedule. And I find those techniques generally feel make people feel like they've got some control over their circumstances. And certainly, now we're in a position we're not able to just run to the grocery store whenever we want. So
right.
if certain foods are particularly enticing and problematic, don't buy them. Like, don't put yourself in that situation where you feel like the pantry is calling to you or the refrigerator is calling to you. I'll give you an example. My husband and my boys love ice cream. I don't buy it very often because it doesn't last long. And so because it was Easter weekend, I told them I bought, 2 half gallons, one vanilla, one chocolate of this ice cream they really like. And I told them, I said, when it's gone, I'm not buying more. And so I told them, if you're smart, you'll take a little bit and, you won't eat half the half gallon, which is usually what happens with teenage boys. Their appetites
Right.
are ridiculous. So again, it goes back to moderation, not deprivation. I'm not a fan of people depriving themselves, but also kind of not letting yourself go completely overboard. If you feel like you had a day where you ate too much, then the next day, shorten that feeding window, maybe just have one meal and then get back on track. And that's really the message that I want to share, is that irrespective of what you've eaten the day before, you can get back on track.
Right. Well, so a couple things, like one, like why would we even want to shorten our feeding window? Like what's the benefit of that?
Shortening your feeding so longer, you give yourself more bowel rest, so more digestive rest. And you're tapping into this, benefit of autophagy, which is the spring cleaning of the cells. And certainly when we're in this kind of pandemic situation, it allows our bodies the opportunity, if we've been exposed to a virus, doesn't have to be COVID-19. If we're exposed to a virus or a bacteria, it gives our bodies a little bit more time to clear what is not designed to be there. And you'll oftentimes hear, my grandmother used to say, you starve a fever, you starve, if you're sick, it's really better just to keep yourself
Oh,
really well hydrated. And I think that's also another message. Stay super hydrated. That is so, so critical right now. So, there are a lot of things that happen. We know that when we're not eating, we're keeping our insulin really well balanced. We're keeping it low. So sometimes people will feel like they have more energy, more mental clarity, all things that I think can be beneficial, especially if you're trying to work from home as a parent or trying to help your children with their studies or oversee their studies. So lots of benefits. But what I'm finding from and I'm hearing from a lot of people is that fasting just seems easier. It gives them one less thing to have to worry about. They don't have to worry about maybe they make breakfast for their children, but then they just go on with their day. And then when
right.
noon comes or 1 o'clock comes, they break their fast. And they're just feeling like they have a little bit of control over a situation where they don't have a lot of control.
So that, oh my gosh, there's so many pieces to dive into, but the big one for me is, at what age do you say we can start fasting, and and below what age are we going to say, you know what, we really do need to have more free reign over sort of our calories?
I would say when you are 18. So generally when young men and young women have stopped growing, that's typically, so a young woman is probably stopped growing by 18. Most young men have stopped growing. So 18 and up, it's certainly a strategy that you can utilize. I always get hate mail when I say this, but if you're 70 or older, I think most people should not be restricting their calories. So, between those parameters, you have a
Right.
pretty large proportion of the population that can certainly benefit from a little bit less in terms of eating hours, because we've been conditioned to believe that we should snack all day long, and it's hard when you're at home and you're conditioned to eat that way. You can really derail. You can really go off the reservation, if you will, in terms of your diet and your your normal eating plans when you're just exposed to food all the time. Some people really do struggle with that emotional connection to food, and so it can be hugely problematic. So I always remind people, when you can stick to this particular window, it can sometimes make you feel like you've got a little bit more control, as opposed to it's just, you know, you're just going to eat from the moment you get up to the moment you go to bed. And that doesn't make any of us feel good at all.
No, it seems like we get that quick hit of dopamine or
Mhm.
whatever from our food, and we get that, but then we get into that cycle of not feeling well physically, then we
Mhm.
emotionally beat ourselves up. But I really love intermittent fasting. Breakfast is by far my favorite meal of the day.
Mhm.
I've been really happy because I've been able to eat it around 2 o'clock every day now
Yeah.
because I don't eat breakfast almost
Mhm.
ever. Um, but I also have told my patients, like, hey, if you want to intermittent fast 5 days out of the week and take two
Correct.
days off,
Yep.
that's not a bad deal. But I really like the idea of it turning on our longevity genes,
Mhm.
turning on autophagy, because I see a lot of people with chronic infections,
Mhm.
and we have a hard time getting inside of cells
The
in the
mitochondria.
intracellular area to go after these
Yeah.
bacteria and these viruses. So, what better thing to do than supercharge your body to go after it?
Correct. And I think, when you're talking about mitochondrial mechanisms as it relates to intermittent fasting, I think that's a really important qualifier. So, for those that are listening and maybe aren't familiar, mitochondria are the powerhouses of our cells. So, when you have, chronic diseases or chronic, infections, it can impact the ability of those cells to function really effectively. And so, there's so many benefits to fasting. And as Tom said, you don't necessarily have to do it every single day. That's the most amazing thing about intermittent fasting is it's flexible. And so sometimes I'll say to people, if you like Easter is a good example. I'm sure there are people who had breakfast, probably had a small lunch, and probably had a nice Easter dinner. And that's totally okay. That's the really cool thing is you don't have to be super rigid about it for it to be effective. You still garner the benefits, even if you're not doing it 7 days a week. As you mentioned, 5 days out of the week, if you're doing it, and then 2 days you have a widened feeding schedule is totally fine. And I think that's really critical because sometimes that amount of flexibility can make someone say yes as opposed to no.
Hmm. Well, I think the other thing that comes up for me too is it's sometimes hard in the beginning, but the actual sensation of hunger is actually a good thing because we're increasing some of our, of our AMPK, which is sort of
Mhm.
like it's the opposite of our gas tank. As our gas
Mhm.
goes down, this goes up. And this really triggers us to get into this healing state, and
Mhm.
so we need to stress our body with things like exercise and, you know, maybe going out in the world and doing things, but then we need to rejuvenate and build, and we can turn it on even better this way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, for anyone that's listening, if you haven't tried intermittent fasting before, I mean, this is probably a perfect time to try it out. You're N of one. Maybe you can get your spouse or your significant other to do it with you. And sometimes having that social support can make it a whole lot easier. And you don't have to start off doing 16 hours. You could just do 13 or 14 and see how you feel and kind of go from there.
One of the things that I always point out is that adults really need to be sleeping
Mhm.
somewhere in the average of 8 to 9 hours a night. I know a few
Mhm.
people or maybe a lot, like to get less, but we really, the research shows you need that time to
Mhm.
sleep. So it's beautiful. Let's say you don't even believe me, but you'll take 8 hours. Now, if you stop eating 2 or 3 hours before you go to bed, which isn't too hard to do, then you wake up, you've got 11 hours of your 13-hour fast done. And if you do a little bit of work in the morning or take the dogs for work,
Mhm.
next thing you know, it's noon and you're already at 16
Yeah.
hours. So to me, I use it as a way to trigger people to remember they need to go to sleep on time.
I think that's a great suggestion. And I hope everyone is sleeping in. I mean, that's one of the things. I'm usually like a 4:30, 5 a.m. jump out of bed, go to the gym person.
Oh my God.
And so
No,
I've been
no, thank you.
sleeping. No, I've been sleeping till 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. My kids are astounded. They're like, Mom never sleeps in. And I said, I think one of the benefits of this time right now is I can't jump in the car and go to the gym. So I sleep in and I've been enjoying it. I mean, this may be a whole new a whole new me sleeping in. This is completely different than what I've been doing for years. But I agree with you. It's really easy when you factor in at least 7 to 8 hours a night of really high quality sleep into that fasting window, and people realize it's really not that hard. It's just the mindset shift to understand that you're not going to die not eating breakfast. Because I think I think our mothers, we grew up with our mothers telling us breakfast is the most important meal of the day, which was probably embedded in them by, the Kellogg's or one of the other
Exactly, right?
cereal companies.
It's interesting. You said something that I think is really important to touch on is like, was it your grandmother or whatever said, hey, just, starve a fever. or whatever it is. And I'm like, my grandmother said something like that, but it
Yes.
was like, but then it kind of in that conversation, we're talking about listening to your body.
Mhm.
And you've even said that with the fasting. It sounds like there's days where you should, don't worry about it. And other
Right.
days where, push through it.
And I think, yes, and I think we have gotten so disconnected from our bodies. We really have been conditioned that we don't know better. And yet intrinsically, if we listen to our bodies, just the example I just gave of I'm listening to my body, I'm getting more sleep. That's what my body needs right now. I'll be able to fight off an infection much more easily if I'm well rested. And the same goes for, anything that we're doing right now in terms of our self-care, that whether it's, recognizing maybe one day you feel like you need more carbohydrates, and the next day you feel like you need a little bit more protein, just allowing yourself the ability to be flexible as opposed to being rigid. And I think that rigid dogma is just as detrimental as the mindset that we can't evolve, shift, and change. And so this is a great opportunity to change some of the self-care things that we're doing. Try something new for ourselves. I certainly have been tinkering away myself. I'm like my N of one. I definitely enjoy, seeing what works, what doesn't work, trying new things out.
Nice. So, um, this is amazing, and I know you and I can talk for days on end about all this stuff. I just so love it. Speaking of trying new things, I think that there's at least a handful of people, and if not, maybe everybody's ahead of the game. But what about the glasses?
Yes. So everyone's probably wondering why I'm wearing these funky glasses. So there is blue light that comes out of our electronics. And so this is a perfect example. After 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night, I wear blue blocking glasses because the blue light that comes out of our electronics dysregulates, there you go, dysregulates the secretion of a hormone called melatonin. And melatonin is what tells our bodies it's time to go to bed. So if I sit in front of a computer at this time of night, not only will I not be able to fall asleep, I'm going to get like a second wind
Hmm.
shortly, and then I won't be able to go to bed. So I really endeavor, and my kids laugh at me. I sit in my bed or wherever we are. Um, I sit in my bed at night, or if we're watching a movie as a family, I've always got my blue blockers on. It just helps me stay attuned to what my body needs, and also helps, with I'm all about preserving melatonin. That's why I get out in the sun first thing in the morning to support the circadian rhythm, and so that's why I'm wearing these awesome glasses.
They are super awesome, and I will admit I usually wear them, but when I do things like this, I often don't want to deal with the reflection. But
Hmm.
so what I'm going to take some melatonin as soon as I'm done, and then
Smart.
and turn it back down, because it's so important. So Cynthia, I can't thank you enough for making the time to join us for this, and
Yeah.
really just I've learned so much about intermittent fasting through all the times we've talked, and it's really nice to talk to other people who are so passionate about health, but then also realize that there's a real life that we're all living, and it doesn't. And moderation, not deprivation, might be something I need to borrow from you.
Please do. It's actually, I think it's comforting for people to understand that even though we're all healthcare providers, we're all real people. We're all navigating this time, and trying to make sense of it, and trying to be examples to our children and our significant others and our patients.
Mm.
And so I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to connect with everyone tonight.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, and we'll definitely do it again. And all the best to you and your family. And I'm sure
Thank
we'll
you.
be. This is. I just can't. I just everybody who's joined in for the mini series, both attending and the people who are coming on as experts. I just want to. I'm starting off with heartfelt gratitude, not saving it till the end. I'm just so thankful that everybody's here to help. So we will talk to you soon, Cynthia. Thank
Sounds
you.
good. Thank you.
All right. Everybody, up next, we're going to be hearing from another good friend of mine. Dr. Terry Walls is a world-renowned physician, researcher, and author of the Walls Protocol. And like Cynthia, Terry is an incredible badass who walks the walk and talks the talk. Terry had progressive multiple sclerosis that landed her in a tilt recline wheelchair after failing conventional medical treatments. And so her personal journey really is inspiring, talking about how we can utilize food and diet and lifestyle to really just sort of optimize her health to the point where she's able to ride her bike to work, at least when they let us all go into work. So Terry, I see that you're with us here, and we can get you to join us with the video. It'll be perfect. There she is.
And
It looks
I
like,
should be unmuted now.
all right.
Correct?
Well, it looks like we all need to do our cool glasses for the rest of the time,
Yes,
huh?
I went and got my cool glasses. I didn't want to be left out. So I hope the glare is not a problem.
No, actually, it's crazy. I've never actually been able to look at somebody else in the same one. These are the ones from Dave, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're very red and they are very potent at making it easier for my brain to make the appropriate amount of melatonin. So absolutely, when I wear the red glasses, when I don't do interviews late at night or watch my phone or TV, my sleep is much better.
Nice.
Particularly if I couple that with taking a walk outside. So I'm being very attentive to take time to do a walk sometime during the, ideally the morning, certainly over the noon hour if I miss the morning. So I get take my dog out for a walk. Often I convince my daughter to come along with me. And
Nice.
that way I get some sunlight into my eyes. I set those biologic time sensing cells in the back of my retina that talk up to my brain. Again, for those biologic time sensing cells. And so everything stays synchronized. And as long as I'm not confusing my eyes with more blue light at night, then I'll make melatonin appropriately.
Yeah, it's interesting because I turned all of my, I have the night shift on my phone all the time. I've got the computer screens all turned down. And then, of course, to get nice lighting, you have to turn it all up. And of course, we do a lot of this at night so everybody can join us. But so, that, I mean, and Cynthia and I started to talk about it. And I think that most people expect you and I to start talking about food, which I know we will.
Yes,
But
yes.
what is this melatonin thing? Because I mean, you just told us why what you do to
Correct.
keep it around, but why do we care?
So we have a diurnal secretion of many of our hormones that match the day-night cycle. Cortisol is up in the morning, down in the afternoon. Melatonin comes up in the evening. And it turns out that melatonin is a very potent antioxidant in the brain. And there's more research coming out that melatonin has antiviral capabilities. And melatonin appears to be really important in the clearance of amyloid out of the brain. And what many people may not realize is that amyloid in the brain is sort of a last defense antimicrobial. It's a protein that will help the brain protect itself from viruses, from bacteria. So in fact, making amyloid is a good thing because it's an antimicrobial defense. But then you need to be able to clear it out of your brain at night. And so you want to have low insulin levels because that will support clearing your amyloid. And you want to have plenty of melatonin. And you want to have plenty of sleep.
That's one of my favorite topics is the sleep thing, because it's interesting because the work that I do a lot with Lyme disease and other chronic infections, we're finding that amyloid is in the amyloid plaques in these neurofibrillary tangles of like Alzheimer's. We're actually finding spirochetes from Lyme. Now,
we're finding all sorts of microbes, things that we don't want in our brain. So
chlamydia, pneumonia,
So we absolutely want to be able to make amyloid. Amyloid's a very important part of our defense mechanisms, but we have to be able to clear the amyloid if we've made it. So making amyloid is not the problem. Failure to clear amyloid that was made in defense is very much a problem.
And so for anyone watching I think a lot of us have heard about the lymphatic system where we're draining all the lymphatic fluid, parts of the immune system, washing away sort of toxins. In the brain, it's a little different. And the system is called the glymphatic system. And it's basically the main way that we're detoxifying our brain from things. And one of the primary things that mobilizes is amyloid. And the process seems to be, and I've read anything from 70 to 90% of the activity of this system is while we're sleeping, and it's looking even like it's deep sleep.
Deep sleep. Yes. Yes. So that's one of the reasons people may have heard me talk about taking a cold bath or an ice bath before going to bed, that dropping your core temperature will shorten the time to fall asleep. It will shorten the time to fall into deep sleep, and it will give you a longer period of deep sleep. So you can do a long cold shower, you could do a cold bath, you could do an ice bath, you could do some of the Wim Hof ice training technique.
Guilty.
Yeah. So all of these are really very, very powerful tools. And if we look at our ancestors, our Brunhildes and Beowulfs of our ancestral mothers and fathers, before we had houses, homes, we slept outside, and we're on the ground. Air temperature always dropped, so the ambient sleeping temperature always dropped. Our core temperatures dropped during the night. When we created clothing, that was an advantage. Then we created shelter. Then we created air conditioning, heating systems. Actually, first it was heating systems, then eventually air conditioning systems. And we steadily made more narrow the temperature with which we live. And that decreases our resilience. Decreases our resilience considerably. I talk about this in my book, that it's really important for us to have gentle temperature stress. So I want people to be hot and sweat, not dangerously so, but I want to expand the zone of temperatures that you can live and operate in. So I think it's a reason to go outside every day, appropriately attired. Go outside, sweat, go outside, be cool, dress appropriately. I don't want you to become hypothermic, but I do want you to be exposed to those cold temperatures. And it's a reason to take saunas. It's a reason to take cold showers. It's a reason to take cool baths, cold baths. And then if you are so inclined to train for it, ice baths.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because that whole process to me is, Cynthia and I were talking about using intermittent fasting to stimulate autophagy, but cold exposure as well as exercise can also stimulate autophagy, which leads to longevity. And
now
I'll throw another, go ahead.
I want to put this in context of COVID-19 though.
Yes.
So I'm very fond of Hormesis, that intermittent stress.
That's what I was just going to ask you about.
Intermittent stress followed by rest, recovery, and repair. And so there's a lot of debate and conversation that I'm having with other Institute for Functional Medicine faculty about how much Hormesis is appropriate during the time that we're all facing COVID. What level of stress is good? Mild is good, moderate is good, or is moderate good, or how far can we go? Because I'll take where we have a great deal of agreement. A water fast or a 5-day periodic fast, or even the 5-day periodic calorie restriction, the fasting mimicking diet. In animal models, all of those show that the immune cells fall, and depending on the animal model, it might fall by as much as 30%. This is not the time to have your immune cells drop by 30%.
Right.
So we're all feeling very comfortable saying this is not the time to do a water fast, to do a periodic fast. And we don't want people doing that. The intermittent calorie restriction, we're not quite so clear. Certainly if you're having any symptoms, we don't want you to do that.
Right.
Some of us, and I'm inclined to be concerned, because we can have this virus without symptoms, I'd rather you not depress your immune cells during that asymptomatic phase. out of the abundance of caution. So I would not do calorie restriction during this time, and I
Mhm.
would probably not do a 5-day calorie restriction, that fast mimicking diet during this time period.
Yeah.
Then the next question comes down to, well, what about time restricted feeding? What about intermittent fasting? In here, we have a variety of opinions. And some are more comfortable with uh, a 500 calorie restricted day, 2 days a week. Some are more comfortable with a 16-hour time restricted feeding during that time period. In there, I think my response is, if that's your usual pattern,
Exactly.
I think that's fine. It is not the time to start a 500 calorie day, 2 days a week during this time period. I think I could be okay with you starting a 12-hour time restricted feeding if that's new to you. But I would be very slow at going to a 16-hour time restricted feeding. Some of my colleagues are much more comfortable telling folks to do that. I think it depends on the circumstance, because we know blood sugar dysregulation is so bad for you that if your
Right.
sugars are really high, and this is a way to get your sugars in better control, then the benefit of a better sugar control makes it worthwhile.
Well, and I've been saying the whole time, Terry, is like if you are a person who has a lot of sugar, let's cut down on your sugar. I'm not suggesting we do a wholesale, just like if you're drinking 3 sodas a day, just get rid of all of them right away. I'm saying you should be working in that place, because I don't think
Yeah.
anybody should be drinking a soda. But as an example, if you were to just over time work in that direction, because if you cut out like a whole can of soda, you're going to be decreasing your sugar. But I'm worried about the additional stress, emotionally, and also in the microbiome changes.
We don't want to have withdrawal. We don't want to have high cortisol. So I want you to do things that you and your family can embrace and be successful. Replacing sweetened beverages with water as much as you can. Replacing sugar with things that are good for you. Fruit that you can peel would be good for you.
Right.
Even if you're the standard American diet and you're adding more non-starchy vegetables, more legumes, whole grains, so more of a Mediterranean diet, that's clearly a step in the right direction. So the more we can improve the overall quality of the diet, I think that is marvelous. And if you're up for starting the Walls diet, I think that would be excellent. But I want you to do it at a pace that you and your family can comfortably achieve.
Well, it's interesting. So to me, the one piece that I really love about Hormesis, which is where we're doing that mild to moderate stress, so that for a duration of time and a level of stress, it doesn't become a toxin, doesn't become a problem, there's, like you said, there's the rest and the recovery, but there's also another word I love to add in there, is it requires you to be able to adapt,
Yes.
right? So we have, it's recovery and adaptation. And so to me, if I were to go and hop on, Walls paleo keto, squared, like my body's not going to be able to adapt to that quickly. Whereas what I want to do is make a change then that stresses me a little, then I adapt, and then I can move on. And that window of, like, for me, I exercise a lot. And so I can exercise at a certain intensity and not suppress my immune
Correct.
system, because I've worked up to that.
You've worked up to that. I would also caution people who maybe are great athletes that this is still a time to have moderate intensity for you as an athlete. It's not the time to have the ultra endurance experience. So
Absolutely.
So in my tribe, a moderate intensity might be a walk around the block, half mile, and they want to really push themselves. And so it'd be a real struggle to do 2 miles. They'd be flat out exhausted and couldn't function. That would be catastrophic. We want you to do moderate intensity, but I don't want you to do a ultra endurance activity for you.
Right.
And so, maybe for you, that would be doing a Ironman uh, in one
You give me
day.
a little too much credit.
A little too much. Okay. We do know in Italy, it's pretty interesting. The folks who competed in marathons and a ultra distance for that individual can be a very inflammatory event. It may increase the risk for a more inflammatory response to COVID. So moderate exercise that is it within your usual capability, I'm totally fine with.
Right.
Going far beyond your usual athletic activity, I would rather you not do.
I agree. And I tell people a lot too, because in my tribe, it's, not everybody's regained their health to the level I have to be doing this crazy stuff. But I talk to them about doing things like, you think you can do a mile walk, right? You're pretty sure that that's the moderate that you can do safely today. So do 70% of that. Because I find that a lot of people, when they're really trying to get back on track, I think there's two people. There's the people trying to get back on track. We don't want them to accidentally overdo it. The other side of that is some people need a little push to do a little more.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So
yes.
I think it's really important to remember, though, that like all of these are tools. Like food is a tool for us, and exercise is a tool, and we need, we don't want to go an extreme in any direction. It sounds like what you're saying.
Correct. Another thing that we've been talking about, I think most people are aware that this is a respiratory transmitted infection. However, there's also now clear evidence that some people with COVID end up with vomiting, profound diarrhea that looks very much like cholera, which again, in the conversation I'm having with my faculty colleagues we think the biology of the fact that some people have what looks like cholera, to me, suggests that this is also a foodborne, which cautious now. Want it to, because that drops the pH down and makes it less likely that we're going to have active virus or troublesome bacteria there. So I'm telling my tribe, now's the time to learn how to make sauerkraut and have your cooked vegetables, which when you cook vegetables, you decrease your vitamin C content. So you're either going to have fruit you can peel, so citrus would be really great, and sauerkraut. Our ancestors figured out that the sailors that used to die of scurvy, when they started feeding these sailors sauerkraut or citrus, they didn't die of scurvy. And so, again, for hundreds of years, that's how our ancestors survived with sauerkraut in the root cellars. So they would have plenty of vitamin C in their root vegetables that they cooked and meat.
Right. I think it's so important that there's so many different places to get the nutrients we talk about. It's not just vitamin C from, orange juice and getting like an IV of pure sugar. And there are those different places to get it from. It's interesting too, because we talk about COVID-19 and the ACE2 receptors on the cells in the respiratory tree and in the alveoli and everything. But there's also, from my understanding, a pretty high concentration of those ACE2 receptors that the virus docks on in the enterocytes, in the sort of the cells in the gut. So it's interesting to see where it's going to all pan out. But I think the things we can do to keep our gut as healthy as possible are critical here.
Correct. And it raises the question, this is a new virus. We don't fully understand all of the routes of transmission yet. Clearly, coughing, sneezing is a big route. Is fecal oral another route? We don't know. I don't have any studies that identify that. So I'm just advising people to be cautious.
It's interesting too. I found some papers showing that, the SARS-CoV-2 virus is very sensitive to changes in pH, both up and down. So if it's more acidic or more alkaline, as well as heat, and I've seen different numbers, but somewhere in the roughly 140 degree Fahrenheit range, but that it can be actually frozen and it won't do much to it, which again, I mean, theoretically, if that's true, that an acidic environment will be bad, going through the stomach acid should neutralize it. But there's a whole bunch of pathogens that it should get neutralized in the stomach acid, and they don't.
Well, and the other question is, are you making stomach acid? How many of us can no longer make stomach acid very well, or are taking medication that suppresses our stomach acid? A lot of folks are taking antacids. They may have heard me talk about the benefits of alkalinizing, and they may have decided to go down the Alka-Seltzer Gold route with sodium potassium bicarbonate, which alkalinizes you, and that's good, but it may decrease your stomach acid. Or they may be going down the apple cider vinegar, lime juice, lemon juice route, which is also paradoxically alkalinizing, but it keeps your stomach acid up. So that's the alkalinizing route that I'm choosing.
Yeah, because didn't I see a picture on your website that shows like your glass, you had in front of the computer with the glass of water and this huge thing of apple cider vinegar sitting there?
Yeah. That's right. That's right. It's not that I'm drinking the apple cider vinegar straight, but I was teaching my tribe, like, okay, here's a way you can alkalinize. And of course, they were very confused, like, how can I alkalinize drinking dilute apple cider vinegar?
Right.
So I had to explain that paradoxically, you can do it with the bicarbonate, or we can do it with the apple cider vinegar and lemon juice, because those are metabolized that way.
Yeah. So, and I've been because I've for a long time used things like lemon and lime in my, Herxheimer or treatment flare sort of detoxification protocols. And people are always like, really? If I acidify my gut, it'll make me more alkaline.
It is confusing. It is confusing to people. Yes.
So is there a 37.5-second or 90-second version that we can share with people?
So you mean about why apple cider
how
vinegar?
It happens? Yeah.
It increases the stomach acid. You're pulling less mineral from your skeleton, and therefore you have less draw into your bloodstream in terms of needing to pull more bone mineral, more calcium, magnesium out of your skeleton into your bloodstream to neutralize the acid.
Nice. Well, and so to me, it's so impressive that so guys, this is like Terry Walls is telling us how to heal ourselves with food, but there's all this science behind it. And that's one of the things that I find, Terry, that's really tough with what's been going on in this particular coronavirus situation is like you're basing so much of what you're talking about on gazillions of years of research, but now we're sitting here where we don't know all the right answers and we're trying to utilize the best information in front of us. I mean, how do you do that?
So, I'm watching people talk about the benefits of taking a variety of supplements to create these mechanistic supports for attacking COVID-19. But what I want everyone to understand is when we look at these mechanism studies, nearly all of our supplement studies are based on food studies that are done epidemiologically that say these nutrients are really great for reducing the risk of cancer, heart disease, diabetes. And then we do and so we know the nutrient's important. We do a supplement study, and nearly always the supplement study is disappointing or harmful. And that's because the nutrient in food is very beneficial. Food is complex. It has this complicated relationships with other nutrients in our food. The message I want everyone to hear is that the food you eat will be vastly more important than whether you're taking vitamin C, zinc, resveratrol, curcumin, or any of that other stuff. It is
Quercetin.
the
Yep.
food. It is the food. It is the food. You cannot supplement your way out of a crappy diet and expect to have a good outcome. These are all theoretic ideas when we're talking about vitamin C, zinc, quercetin, curcumin, resveratrol, based on the same type of observational studies that we have used to propose supplement studies that often fail.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, I'm not trying to argue against taking those supplements. You can take them. But the far more important decision you're going to make is, are you eating vegetables? Are you having garlic? Are you having cabbage? Are you having sauerkraut? Are you having sufficient protein? Are you having omega-3 fats and omega-6 fats? That's what's going to make you healthy and more vital and more resilient. And that will be far more powerful than whether or not you're taking any particular supplement cocktail. And I'm part of the IFM faculty that's recommending these supplement cocktails. So it's not that I don't think that there's no role for supplements.
Right.
But the role for food is vastly more important.
Terry, thank you so much for saying that, because to me, it's like I'm always trying to give people the tools that they can take advantage of at home. And am I taking a little extra immune boost now? Yes. Am I taking like a little bit of a multivitamin to make sure that I'm not missing anything? Because some days we go to the store and can't get everything we want. Sure, but I couldn't have said it. I mean, no one can say it better than that. I mean, it's just so important to be able to eat real food. And I think that puts the onus on us to actually have to care for our own health. And our own health is our own health. And we are the number one person who is in charge of and responsible for ourselves.
Now, one of the strategies that have been really important for me for my mental health is thinking about, this is a circumstance that none of us want. We're all experiencing loss, strain, difficulty. And with any loss, there's this typical denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance. And we finally, and we individually and our business organizations and our regional and federal governments are all in varying states of denial to acceptance. And then you need to go to the next place. Could either be acceptance and say like, okay, there's nothing I can do. I'm either going to succumb to this illness or not. Or I could say, well, I'm going to learn and do a better job of taking care of myself, see what there is to learn so I could put myself in a better circumstance. In those individuals and families and local, regional, and federal governments that figure out, okay, we don't like this circumstance, but by God, I'm going to learn and do the best that I can, we'll do better. So I'm looking at us as a society, and I see many people admitting that they're cooking for the first time. They're learning how to improvise with a recipe, like, okay, I don't have all those ingredients, but okay, I don't have them. I got to make with what I've got on hand because I don't get to go to the store now. So we're learning to improvise. We are learning to spend time together as a family, that we aren't rushing around so much anymore. We are learning to help our kids with their homework. We are learning to pray, to meditate, to be mindful. We're learning that, well, I don't quite know what's happening, but I'm going to try and learn and see other things that I could do. My extended family members who sort of thought I'm pretty eccentric and a little odd with my ideas are now calling me and asking me like, okay, say,
how can I do this?
Do you have is there anything I should be doing? So the more that we can move from acceptance, there's nothing I can do, to acceptance, I got to learn as much as I can about what I could do, what might be helpful. And I'm encouraged that there are more and more of us in society that are taking the decision, well, I have to learn and be more proactive.
Terry, I mean, just mind-boggling, because it's totally that. The next step is like, we also have to accept the fact that we have so much control here. I think we've grown up in the society where we're told we don't have the control over our health, but what you're telling us is we actually do. So,
Well, here's the reality. Vaccines aren't going to save us. We don't have drugs that are going to save us. We have drugs that might be a little bit helpful. Oxygen's a little bit helpful. Ventilators are a little bit helpful, and potentially life-saving. But most of us, the things that are going to really help are not smoking, eating more vegetables, meditating, sleeping, going outside, getting some vitamin D,
fresh air,
sunlight, getting fresh air, having as many mindful, prayerful interactions with myself and my environment and my family to keep my cortisol under control. So this is all about self-care. When we spoke earlier, I made the observation that, pandemics have been going on for about 1.5 billion years. And we've been having
right.
this arms race between the microbes and everything that was bigger than a microbe for 1.5 billion years or 1 billion years, however long we've had both forms of life. And they'll go on forever. Our children and all of our descendants will have the same fight. And it's always going to be the same thing. It is always going to be distancing, soap and water, and self-care. That's going to determine who has the best chance of flourishing.
Yeah. Teri, thank you for sharing your love and your wisdom with us as always. This has been remarkable. I'm so grateful for you sharing with this group and for our friendship, and you're a total inspiration to me. As I've told you before, even in the beginning of my career when I was trying to learn what the heck a healthy eating lifestyle was, you were the first. Your book and protocol was the first sort of place that I went to as a resource. So heartfelt thanks for all you do, and thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you, Tom.
All right. Have a great evening. Love to you and your family and your whole tribe.
Okay. Thank you.
So everyone, thank you so much to Teri Walls for an amazing time chatting. And she just reminded me of a Marianne Williamson. Here we go. Let's start that one over. Marianne Williamson quote. Because, she said, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond belief, beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And I think what Dr. Teri Walls is sharing with us is we have an amazing ability to support our healing and support our longevity and our immune system through the actions we have. And one of the things Teri mentioned was that we need to, kind of start being a little more creative in the kitchen. And so I could think of no better person than our next guest, who is Katie Kimball. So Katie, hopefully we'll have you turn on your video for us here. Yeah. Katie, I saw her last August at a Mindshare conference, and Katie was up doing this future of medicine talk about, how the heck to actually get together with your kids and eat in the, cook in the kitchen and have them eat. And it was just so awe-inspiring to see someone who was able to make this topic that's usually a struggle into something that was exciting and I was enthusiastic about and got the whole room rocking. So I thought, she created, Kids Cook Real Food e-course with her and her 4 kids. And she really helps teach parents how to cook together with their kids and build a family connection in the kitchen, and to really supercharge their kids' creativity. But the other part is she also brings this real world experience to it where, when we don't exactly fully feel totally stoked about what's going on, then and we get stuck in the moment of, oh my God, what do we do now? That's where she's the expert. And I'm so happy to have you here, Katie.
Man, thank you. I feel woefully inadequate with my orange glasses because they're not as wrappy and red as
I know, right? But that's all right. I got orange ones.
Now
I've got so many of these.
That's perfect.
It's so good to see you.
You too. Well, thank you. I appreciate that introduction because I feel like that is my superpower, is the practical. Like I am a science geek beyond belief. And I'll listen to Cynthia and Dr. Walls all day long. Like, tell me more. I just want to learn. But then, and I think a lot of moms especially are this way, I'm like, yes, eat vegetables, sauerkraut, go. And you go into your kitchen and you're like,
how?
like, we need the practical. So that's where I can come in and go, okay, step 1, step 2, chill, mama, you can do this. Like, here's how to distill it down.
Yeah, I'm so stoked for this conversation because like this is the energy I remember. I was like, who is this person? She rules. Like because it's like, you know, you're passionate and you can and I feel that you've done this, right? And it's like when you're like, hey, I have 4 kids and I figured out how to do this in the kitchen. I mean, I've got a daughter who when she was like 4 or 5, I got her the knife with the little finger guard and then the other one, and she was and it lasted for like a month, and then if at best, and then, you know, a year, you know, and she plays in the kitchen and we have our moments and we try to take advantage of them. But what are I mean, 2 things I really want to touch on is, one, how do we just get creative as parents in the kitchen? And then how do we get our kids as energized about being in the kitchen with you as you are about talking about this?
Well, okay. So how can parents be creative in the kitchen? Like with food?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Dishes, cleaning up. No, yeah, definitely with the food. Let's start with the food part.
I know it does kind of sap. So I will say, I mean, in light of this COVID-19 stuff, I went to the store last Monday and I am determined not to go again for 4 weeks. And it honestly has nothing to do with the germs, but I'm a highly sensitive person, and seeing like half the people in masks and half the people not, and the whole grocery store just felt oppressive. And I came home and like I was like spent and angry, and I said, kids, this is the food we have. Mama's not going back for a month. So 2 squares toilet paper per wipe, et cetera, et cetera. So for us, it's where I'm like, I'm being very conscious of using up the short lasting vegetables. We have lots of long lasting vegetables. Like cabbage is my best friend right now. We're growing sprouts so that we continue to have fresh food even on week 4, no problem. We can sprout our lentils. And we're having like quite a bit of legumes and rice. We have the black rice and the brown rice, and switching it up, you know, every couple of days, so that it's not like eat all the good food and grill and then have 2 weeks of beans and rice. So we're really trying to switch that up. And salsa heals all wounds, I think. That's good. Children love Mexican food.
Right.
So we talk with our kids about just making stuff out of thin air, like what vegetables can we put together. And in my class, we have one little lesson where we get out all the spices and we kind of put them in little clusters. We smell them and put them in little clusters, like what might go together. And do you think this is pleasant or unpleasant? I know parents tell me they appreciate that kind of like gentle language, so that the kids aren't going, ew, gross. It's, oh, that's unpleasant. And it makes it a very pleasant experience for the parents, because it's all very, sort of upscale, like British tea. This is pleasant.
Right,
this is unpleasant. And then they think about what might go with certain meats or certain vegetables, and just have fun with that.
Yeah, so, it's interesting. As you're saying that, I think about with our daughter, Talia, she loves to start cutting up cucumbers because she loves them, and then mix weird stuff with it. And the one thing I've noticed is that her palate and my palate are very different. We've taught her over time to be kind of similar, but man, she will combine stuff that, to me, if you gave me the list of ingredients, I'm like, that is going to be the grossest thing ever. And then when she gets done with it, it tastes good.
That's awesome. I do think kids have fewer boundaries. Sometimes some kids love recipes though. So you just never know. Sometimes being creative in the kitchen is just finding a really good recipe and following it and loving what you eat. You don't always have to be the like literal creative Swedish chef artist. You can follow recipes and find recipes for anything you have. Like the internet exists, so it's helpful.
So if you take a recipe, if you're going to grab a recipe, and like you said, you may not even have all the stuff you need, and you got to just dive in. Are there any guidelines or just sort of like mindset that you need to have to really kick into that and make that recipe come alive, or to have the creative license to play with it?
Sure. I like to think of a lot of recipes as frameworks. So how do you take a quiche recipe, and maybe it's an asparagus, goat cheese, capers quiche or something, and you don't have two out of those three. But I mean, you can make a pizza quiche with some oregano and some pepperoni from the pantry and some pizza sauce. You can make a Mexican quiche. So, similarly with soups, similarly with pizza, like pasta, you can kind of take every category of food and say, well, let's just make a framework. You should have about a cut 2 cups of the vegetables and 2 cups of the sauce or whatever, and just put things together. We kind of teach our kids to look into the fridge and see what's there. So you might get some leftover rice, you might put it with a homemade cheese sauce and some leftover chicken from a slow cooker meal, and just kind of mix it all up, steam some broccoli. It's always about remembering the vegetables on the side. That's something we talk about.
Yeah. Are there certain foods that, in your experience teaching, parents and kids to do this kind of stuff together, that they act like, like if you're, because I can imagine just sitting back as parents are like, you know what, my kid doesn't like veggies.
Yeah.
I mean, are there like starter veggies?
I don't think it's always about a certain food. I think that's what we get this in our head, that they have to eat like food A or food B or the vegetable food group, or, oh my gosh, my kid doesn't eat green things, where, I'm a terrible parent or something. Food is the experience, and the experiencing food, like scientifically, does help kids eat better. Right. So I know you're having Dr. Nicole Birkins on, is it tomorrow, I think? And she taught me about the idea of exposure. And so I like to call it the exposure bucket. Lots of kids, they tell you when you're feeding your toddlers, right? Oh, like, don't give up. If they spit things out, feed it 10 times and then they'll eat it, right? Which is like sort of good advice, except that all children aren't the same. So that number 10 is not going to be the same for all kids, right? Like baby Katie might accept broccoli after 2 tries, but baby Tom might need 157 because baby Tom's a very picky eater, right?
Right.
And some moms are like, yes, my kid is 200. And so that can be a long, hard road for a parent to put a piece of broccoli on baby Tom's plate 157 times because he needs that many exposures, to get him to eat the broccoli. But what's wonderful is that any exposure counts. You don't have to taste it. So you can, not right now. Usually I would say shop for the broccoli, but not right now. You can wash the broccoli, cut the broccoli, serve the broccoli, cook the broccoli, have it on your plate, pass the broccoli to a family member. Like every single tactile exposure, whether it's touch or smell or, hopefully some tastes, will get that child closer to maybe they have, again, 157 threshold bucket. And anytime they're experiencing food away from the table, there's not that pressure to eat it. So again, it's not about the food. It's about taking the pressure to eat it off. It's about exposure to food. It's about, psychology says you create an open loop. Humans don't like open loops. And so when a child is part of the making, there's a little piece in their brain that wants them to be a part of the eating, to finish the process, to close that loop. So it's a little magic pixie dust to get kids involved in the kitchen, regardless of the vegetable.
So you're saying I could actually get my kid to cook the veggies, not eat the veggies, and that will lead to them eating the veggies later on?
Sooner than they would have had they never been involved in that experience that day. Yeah.
Nice. So I do need to point out one thing. That means that all of us adults have to eat our veggies. So go replay what Dr. Walls told us, but that's the thing. One of the things I think is so important as a parent and just as a person on the planet, we have so much influence over the people around us, right? And we often downplay that. And it's so important because whether it's at work, whether it's with our spouse, and definitely with our children, even our teenagers, I think Cynthia was talking about some of her kids are like in that age, like, not really, mom. They're still peeking around the corner going, oh, what are mom and dad doing? And if I'm eating pizza and chips all the time, I know what my kid's going to end up doing. But it's interesting that you said it that way, Katie, because I remember like when Talia was young, she just got on veggies right away because it was just like a big part of what we did. And she never left them. But there's this period of time where it kind of dipped a fair amount. And I'm just like, oh, am I a horrible parent? Like, we're both doctors. We talk this, it's like we're like this whole event is like I'm bringing everybody together who's like my friends, and so we can nerd out on like nutrition and food and health. And I'm like, am I doing a bad job? right?
Super common, like ages 2 to 5. Is that when it happened?
It was after that.
Really?
It was
Okay.
so weird. Oh, she would eat, I mean, she would eat everything. And it was like 7 to 9.
Okay.
I was like, yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, we're past it. We made it. She's going to eat veggies the rest of her life. So anyhow, the long and the short of it was we never made it a big deal.
That's good.
It was and then she just did it. Cause I remember when I was a kid, my mom used to make me clear my plate. So she had these nasty canned peas. And I was giving them, and one night I just kept handing them under the table to the dog. And I was so psyched. He was hooking me out. He's eating them and everything. And then I go to get up and my mom yells at me. I'm like, what? And the dog turned me in. They were so bad. He didn't even eat them.
Oh no.
So,
oh no.
yeah. So, but we have to lead by example and actually eat them. My parents did eat those things. I don't know how, but so yeah, it's one of those things, diving in and showing. But I guess one of the things that when you were talking about all that, it just brought back this flood of amazingly, it closed several loops for me, which is why I'm kind of going off. But one of the things, and I wonder what your experience has been, is I've found that our Talia really likes things that taste, that are either, like she likes the cucumber and the mango, but also she loves arugula with lots of lemon juice on it.
Nice.
So have you seen that? Like, I mean, to me, that's kind of a strong peppery flavor with this big, strong citrus. I mean, do some kids really prefer like bold, strong flavors that maybe the adult might be like, ew?
Yeah, true. We process our senses sort of at different rates. And so for some kids, any of those big flavors are going to be way too big and overblown. And we think they're boring because they only like bland foods. But to them, the bland foods taste, more like medium foods would to us, just because their senses are processing so high. Some kids' senses are processing lower. So then they want like those fire Cheetos and those big, hot sauce and like the arugula, because they're, to them, it's not as crazy. I mean, it's just differences for sure. Differences in personality. I don't know. I loved what Cynthia was talking about with her boys and the chores. That's a big passion of mine too, is like,
Right.
I hesitate to be excited that parents are at home cooking with their children, but I'm like, this is what everyone says. Everyone says, Katie, I just don't have time. I don't have time to slow down because we have soccer every night at 6, right? I don't have time to slow down because our life is too busy. And I'm like, everybody has some more time now. So again, I hesitate to be too excited, but it's an ideal time to build those life skills. And I think there's no greater one than how to cook, because we're going to do that 3 times a day, every day,
The whole
rest of
life.
our lives.
Well, it's kind of like this chores, like you were saying, like Cynthia said, it's like, my dad taught me how to not only clean the toilet, but how to fix the damn thing. So now I'm
Love it.
screwed. I have to do it, but I need it as an adult. So so like we're talking about like introducing foods, and sometimes somebody might not like it, and it's just the act of it being around. But what about actually getting your kids in the kitchen? I mean, short of forcing them to, like you have to do this, and then give them a sharp knife, like which may or may not, depending upon your child, be okay.
Right.
What are the tricks and tips to kind of get us moving in the direction of the kitchen? And is the exposure the same type of thing?
It's, I think for doing the task, it's a little bit different than the exposure to the food, but let's split kids up into some different age groups, because motivation and how we do this is going to be very different for, our teenagers and our 3-year-olds. I think like kids 5 and under, they're so intrinsically motivated. Like, what do? Mama, can I help? Mama, can I vacuum? Like, they think doing chores is fun if you don't tell them that it's not, right? Like my 2 youngest are 5 and 8. Gabe and John, and I forget what they did, but they earned a little consequence the other day. I said, all right, you guys,
earned
you
a
have to help
consequence.
Mommy unpack. We just like finished part of our basement. And so some of our pantry food was in boxes packed up. That was a little stressful when this all started. I'm like, I know I have food. I just don't know where it is. So I'm like, you guys are going to help me put the food back on the shelves. So I set the timer for 10 minutes. We did it. And the timer beat him like, okay, thank you. That was your consequence. You guys can go. And they're like, we want to keep going. This is fun.
Right.
I thought this is exactly what some parents don't get, that they think, doing chores can be fun, right? Dancing around with the dust rag, or so 5 and under, you do not have to worry about motivation. It's more getting over your own psychological block that they're going to be slow or messy. right?
Mhm.
So under 5, the beautiful thing is some research was done comparing chores in different areas of the world, some American sociologists, and they noticed that in other countries, they're interviewing like 8 and 9-year-olds. Oh, what do you do for chores at home? And these 8 and 9-year-olds are like, oh, I cook dinner for my mom and I clean and I do the laundry and I fold it all and I put it all away. And the Americans kind of look at each other like, this is not
Like,
our
what?
experience in our country. Like, not only are they doing the entire household worth of chores, they're very excited about it. So the hypothesis that the sociologists came up with is that in those other countries, the parents gave them responsibilities as soon as they could walk. So they had that intrinsic motivation, and there was like this unbroken line of motivation such that when they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, it's just their normal life. Whereas
So nice.
often here in America, we say, oh, honey, that's okay. This is mama's job. You go play. And we're literally training their brain neurons that they don't belong in the kitchen, that this is not the place for them. And then when they're 8 or 9 and we say, hey, let's get started with some responsibilities, they're like, yeah, I don't know about that, Mom. Because
Right.
you've told me, I don't belong here my whole life. So under the little kids, they're good. You don't have to motivate them at all. They love feeling big. They love doing big tasks, So with that age, we get them in the kitchen with a lot of small motor skills. That's what they're working on in preschool anyway, holding scissors, holding pencils. So things like measuring flat, pouring, just use a little creamer pitcher, a little 1-cup measuring cup, and some maybe water outside if it's nice where you live, or like some dry beans inside with a cookie sheet to catch them so you can eat them later because we're not wasting any food right now. But just all these little sort of repetitive, cathartic small motor skills would just pour some like sugar in a bowl and have the kids practice over and over, measuring flat, scraping with the butter knife. And once they have those skills, now maybe you're making a slow cooker meal and you need basil, oregano, and salt, right? You can put your 4-year-old at the table out of your way. And it doesn't matter if they take 5 or 10 minutes to measure a teaspoon of basil, a teaspoon of oregano, a teaspoon of salt into their little cup, because they can then contribute to dinner. And here's where you keep that motivation going as you announce to the family, hey, guess who helped with dinner tonight? Right?
So
it was
good.
Gabe. And then Gabe at age 5 is like,
Look what I
yeah,
did.
he's hot stuff, right? And that's how you keep them motivated. So with your middle kids, you mentioned giving them sharp knives. I think sharp knives are very motivating to kids because they like a little danger.
Mm-hmm.
They like to do things that feel grown up. And so if you can say to your 7-year-old, hey, why don't we learn some knife skills? We bust out a paring knife today. And they're like, are you sure?
Oh, yeah.
They're really. But that alone, I think kids really desire to be able to do authentic skills. So if you can get them started, like get them to do it for the first time, they'll feel sort of that confidence loop, it's called, and then their confidence raises. They want to do it more because it feels good to nourish other people.
Oh yeah, I noticed that like with Talia always announces this, look what I did, or I did this. And, like, I feel like when I was growing up, they're kind of like, oh, well, don't, whatever. Like, no, we celebrate this. I mean, here you got like a 5, 7, 10-year-old who's done all this, and it's like, they really take a lot of pride in it. And we noticed the same thing with the knife. I mean, we actually found, because you don't want your kid to chop their fingers off and stuff. And so we actually spend time, if we're going to do TV, like watching like food TV and then going, I bet you we could make what they just made and then just go play. But it's like, we taught her how to hold, I was showing her how to hold, but then, the food so she could slice down and not cut herself. But I actually found a plastic guard that holds your fingers on the inside. So you can't cut yourself, but it's also molding you to the proper position. And there's so many little cool tricks out there.
Yeah, the right shape. I like that. I'm not a huge fan of the kids' safe knives, like the plastic ones that are serrated.
Oh, no.
Only because they teach you to only use kind of the saw blade motion, and then you have to learn something new when you're actually using sharp knives. So I prefer to give kids the sharp knives and train them well. We have 4 ways to hold the food, 3 ways to hold the knife, and then they learn the same butter knives to chef's knives.
Only 3 ways. You ever see Worst Cooks in America where what the heck's her name? Anne Burrell, if you're using a chef's knife and you have your finger out on the top of it, using it wrong and not holding it, probably should put the red line on your
Oh my goodness.
So Talia knows you don't put your finger out when you're cutting a certain way because
That's great.
Yeah, it's fun. We went sharp knives right from the get-go. We just made sure we had the blocker, I agree 100%. So I forget where we kind of left off in the somewhere 7 or 8 age range.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think sharp knives are a big motivator for the middle-sized kids and the big kids, both, but, and serving other people, which this is tricky because this is my normal advice is like, next time you're going to a potluck, make sure the kids are helping. That doesn't really work right now. But even social media can be helpful, right? So, just yesterday, I don't know what day it is. We were making kale
Right.
chips. My 2 little boys, 5 and 8, they're our kale chip masters. They work at the table. They do the whole process. I don't have to touch anything, which PS parents, there's one of the benefits of slowing down, teaching some skills. You do get some time back. I haven't made dinner on a Wednesday in this year.
Nice.
So I was setting them up for kale chips, and I could tell Gabe didn't really want to. He wasn't really into it, the 5-year-old. And I said, well, Gabe, what do you want me to put on Instagram? That here are the kale chips John made, or here are the kale chips John and Gabe made? And he was like, I'll go wash my hands. So, well, any kind of notoriety is wonderful for kids. And
Right.
I think that works in different ways all the way up. I think I have a freshman in high school, I have a 14-year-old. And I think for him, like, he's already sort of starting to think about what life will be like in college. Most of him is like trying to run backward into middle school. Like, I don't want to grow up yet. He's right there editing videos for me. He's going,
Nice.
And but I think he does know, like, he's had these kind of future casting sessions in his mind where he's like, I'll be able to like make dinner for my roommates, and that'll feel pretty cool. And he makes his own lunch, and other kids around him don't. And so he knows
Right.
that he sort of stands out as special, as above and beyond. And it's any good feeling makes you want to do it more.
Yeah. I think it's the other thing too that what you were just talking about reminds me of is, like, I mean, kids, like, they'll do so much more, and they're so much, like, mentally, emotionally, and physically able to do so much more than a lot of us give them credit for.
Yes.
And if you give them a little challenge, they're usually going to totally exceed, our expectations. And like when we talk about food, like, a lot of time people talk like in a condescending or a downward manner. And really what I think we need to be doing is, children at different developmental ages are just like that. They are different stages of development, but they're still like inside, they're a full human being who deserves the same respect that you and I believe that adults should get.
Yeah.
So we've always talked to our daughter like she's equal, understanding that it's our role to move her along. But I think for the kitchen, it's just like, it's amazing when you just let them go and you give them a couple of pointers.
Mm-hmm. I love to remind parents that, like, if you look at what a kindergartner, how they write, big, blocky, their small motor control is pretty stinky at age 5, and how many words they can read, right? They're pretty limited. And then go just 2 years later, 2nd grade, the writing's smaller, their small motor control, they can write paragraphs and whole stories, and they can read chapter books. And like, that is incredible exponential growth. And yet at home, we're generally still having them sort the socks, dump the stuff in that we've measured, and stir with us in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
We forget that we can exponentially explode their responsibility, and they do love it. They love the more you can give them. So that's, I mean, if I have anything to say to parents during this time, it's capture this time and get the kids doing all the life skills, but especially the cooking, just because that's the one you're going to use 3 times a day. You only have to fix the toilet, like, hopefully a few times in your life.
Right. Well, and I think also some of us who are looking to get time back, like, I remember, like, I wanted some help with cleaning, just a simple task. Yeah. And like Talia cleaning up her room. And I'm like, why am I not getting this at home when I know she does it at school? It's part of their day.
Right.
And she comes home and tells me about it. And then I did exactly, I caught myself a year or 2 ago doing what you just said, which is like, they do it all at school. I come home and I'm just like, oh, we'll just do all that. Or you're not going to do it. I'll just do it. Yeah, just have them do it. So I have another question too, is how do we, let's say that we're a parent or just an adult who doesn't have kids, who is like, yeah, this sounds really cool, but I hate cooking. Like, I mean, are there like, because I feel like, a lot of us can still get a little takeout, but, we're running out of all the freeze dried goods in the store or the, the TV dinners. So what are places where adults can kind of dive in and kind of, or tricks for sparking their interest so that they can eat healthily during all of this and beyond, and also get their kids going?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, I know for like my husband, it took a 10-year journey from when I sort of flipped to like real food, like raw milk, 100%, sourdough and all this stuff, until he accepted it. He let me do it, but he still would, the first year, would go out and buy covert cereal and hide it in the basement. And so it took literally a 10-year process of education. So we're both definitely science geeks, and we had to listen to the Dr. Terry Walls of the world telling us, like, this is the best way to eat for your health and longevity and the way you feel today and the way you sleep, right? And just like once that kind of sinks in, then you're like, okay, you have to be ready to want to do it, I think. Now, for me, having kids got me into nutrition. So hopefully parents out there are thinking, this is the time where I can't complain about the school feeding my kids junk. I can't complain about the sports giving them the Gatorade and the donuts. Like, it's all me, which is intimidating but promising, right? It's all us. So even if you don't love cooking, like, it can be a family activity. And I have a lot of parents say, yeah, Katie, I'm kind of learning along with them because my mom never taught me to cook. So I've like bumbled my way along, but I'm enjoying, learning with the kids through Kids Cook Real Food because they don't have the skills. So, it can be a family activity. Sometimes it's the science geek in you, just knowing that you want whole foods. And if you want whole foods, you got to cook for yourself, but it doesn't have to be complicated, right? You don't have to be a chef. You can just cut a few things or put a few things in a pan and follow a recipe for beans and lentils and rice and stuff, like, it doesn't have to be complicated to cook at home.
Well, I think one of the things a lot of people don't know about me is if I didn't become a doctor, I would have probably been a professional chef. I love it. But I got so enamored with making real food. Like when you go out, if you think about like the best dinner you've ever had, most of the time, except maybe for Italian, it was like salt, pepper, maybe one, and some garlic on something that was cooked awesome. And there's so many ways to find recipes online and start simple is what I would say. Because I learned how to cook Indian food by the smell of it. And because I was into yoga, and like I had friends from India go, that's like real stuff. But it was like, because I played and as you're talking, I keep flashing back to like different parts of my life. It's so fun. It's like when I was a kid.
Which is what food does. We can build these memories for our kids. We can write their stories for them with them.
And my mom tells this story, Katie, where she's like, you just liked being in the kitchen, so I let you be there. She's like, and she's like, I didn't even know what you're doing, but I didn't know what I was doing either. I just knew enough to make the food to put it on the table, right? And I mean, at one point we had Viva Italian dressing and used it to poach boneless, skinless chicken breast. So you can imagine how yummy that was. But and we joke, our family jokes about it now, but we're all three boys, they just let us be creative. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And that's one thing I really want to empower all families to do is try. And the other thing is your kids are so good on the internet. Tell them that you want the simplest, basic, most bulletproof recipe. They'll be able to find it. Yeah. And maybe and then you can do it together.
Yeah. And I collected a couple recipes. We'll make sure that, your audience gets it. Just like simple sort of beans and rice type stuff, the things that you might have in your pantry. I heard Dr. Walls talk about making sauerkraut, and I made kimchi for the first time in forever recently. So I have that recipe. There's so much goodness out there. It doesn't have to be super complicated.
And we did have a question pop in too, and I'm glad I put it on the side here in my notes, and then I almost forgot. So I'm glad you said kimchi and sauerkraut. Are there simple tips for sauerkraut that we can give people now, or is it and then we can definitely send them a recipe when we put the replay and the blast out.
Yeah, I mean, sauerkraut, amazingly, it's not that hard. Like you just slice up the cabbage, you put it in a bowl, you pound all your aggression out on it, which is a good stress reliever in this time. You need either a ton of salt or a medium amount of salt and some whey from your yogurt. And then you stuff it in a jar. Like you don't let the vegetables come out of the liquid, and you just kind of like peek on it every day and say, "Hi, Bubbles. That's good. No mold. Okay. I see you're poking out." You jam it down with a very clean spoon and let it go. Like the bacteria know what they're doing for the most part. So it's amazing how not difficult it is.
And how long would you say you usually leave? I mean, I know you can leave it for a really, really long time to really get it strong, but you know, where do you want to start until it starts to go bad? But
Right.
what's your favorite from beginning to eating, and then from when you can eat it to when you should be done with it?
Sure. Well, I think most people say 7 to 14 days ferment. And again, like I'm the super practical. Like I haven't done like all the 50 million ways because I don't want to think that much. I just want to get it done. So when I made kimchi, which someone told me this is not kimchi, this is just sauerkraut with carrots. I'm like, it tastes really good though. So it's fermented.
All that matters.
I did 10 days. And just, like I would smell it after even 3 days. I said, "Oh, this smells so good. Smell this, honey." And my husband said, "You will never get me to say this smells good, but it smells like I could tolerate eating it." I'm like, "Good, great, okay." So, when it smelled really good to me and I thought, if it gets a few more days sour, it might not smell that good. I think it lasts a really long time in the fridge.
Yeah.
I don't even know how long, but once it's fermented and then if it's in the refrigerator, you're good for a long time.
Yeah, just keep it under the water. It's been my experience as well. Cool. And then oh, here you go. I'm going to post what you sent it to the panelists. Who posted that? Was that you or somebody else? I'm going to
That's
post
me.
it. Okay, good. Whoops,
No, yeah, we talk about our knife skills that we use. And so that's our 10-minute knife skills class. That's our members' favorite class. Just teaching kids
Awesome.
ages 2 to 12, butter knife to chef's knife. Different
Fabulous.
ways to hold a knife.
Yeah, so everybody, I just posted that down in the chat. I will make sure that link goes out with the replay email and all the other resources that we're going to provide you once the whole series is over. Katie, this is amazing. Thank you so much for making the time. This is actually like, I love doing the Dr. Geek thing and talking about it, but if we actually don't dive in and start doing it, and I feel so privileged that my mom let me play and let me experiment. And I'm just so grateful that you're sharing the gift, not only with this group, but with the world about how to get kids in the kitchen. So thank you so much. And all the best to you and yours, and tell your 14-year-old guy he's doing a good job in the corner there doing the video editing. I've got some videos he could edit next.
Oh no, I'm keeping him busy.
All right.
No, it's been an honor to be here, and definitely my mission is to get those kids in the kitchen. Just don't stress out about it, right? Just do it.
All right. Super cool. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And everybody, thanks for joining me. This is day 1 of 3 of our coronavirus Voices of Reason mini-series. And after we talked a lot about different options with food and how to get in the kitchen today, and things to do with our kids, whether our kids are like Jill has to deal with me as her adult child, or our little 10-year-old, we've talked a lot about that. And we're going to be diving in tomorrow to a lot of things, that have to do with children's mental health and physical health during COVID-19. So how to talk about it. We will talk to Nicole Berkins, who's one of our guests, along with Roseanne Kapana-Hodge and Dr. Elisa Song, holistic pediatrician. So we're going to talk about things like, what are we looking for with our kids if they, in helping prevent disease beyond just the food. And if we are exposed, what do we want to be looking for? And then if our kids are sick, what to do. But also, like a lot of what I talked about earlier, what are we doing for our kids now that we're all in the same house? And how do we help them if their focus isn't where it should be without overdoing it for them? And what if we're doing it a situation where, there's something that came up about some breaking news that they either heard on social or you just played on the news. How do we talk about that? So, and we'll be taking questions and having a really good time. Super excited. Then on Wednesday, on day 3, we're going to be having Darren Engels talk about lots of natural medicines. Dr. Tracy Gappin, who is a male hormone expert, but also someone who personally had COVID-19. So we'll be diving into that. And then we'll talk about some mindset stuff and dealing with emotions and uncomfortable feelings through all this with Joan Rosenberg. And then we'll have Mary Morrissey with us. So thanks everybody for joining tonight. Such an honor. I'm so grateful that everyone's here. Please share this with all your friends so that they can get these free resources. And we'll see you tomorrow evening, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks and have a wonderful evening.